Hey Paul, I'm Propagandist and welcome back to the channel to continue our RWBY Retrospective Volumes 1 to 4 Let's Watch. Now, this is actually my first recording session for Propagandist of the new year, technically, and you'd think this would be happening in early January. It's actually mid-January, as of when I record this, because, from my last recording sessions prior to Christmas 2025, I managed to record a few episodes that thus kept me going through January, but now the schedule has sort of run out and I need to actually get recording the next chapter in Volume 3 and all that. So I'm going to be moving on to Chapter 9, this one, ladies and gentlemen. So, I might try to cast my mind back to what went on before Christmas. Obviously, we're at that stage now in the franchise where basically, the brown stuff is going to be hitting the fan, so to speak. In essence, because what happened last time in Chapter 8, it was, that's right, Chapter 8 was obviously Yang being disqualified from the tournament. It was then a little heart-to-heart with Crow. And then, of course, it was Jean and Pyrrha, their little conversation that they had. And then, of course, it started off with the fight between Pyrrha and Penny. And so, of course, Chapter 9, really, now, from what I remember, is very much where, it really starts to take off in terms of the tonal shift from what was previously quite light-hearted and cheery, getting into much, much darker territory. I mean, granted, the last couple of episodes have already been sort of setting up that tonal shift, but this, I'd say, really is the point where that tonal shift starts to become most apparent. Those of us who've watched, obviously, this Volume 4, we know what's going to happen, probably, in this episode, if I remember correctly. It's going to be interesting to see, does it still produce the same effect all these years down the line after I first watched this volume. Now, something else I will say, apologies if the lighting quality on my webcam seems to fluctuate in this episode. It's it being January here in the UK, as you can imagine. Obviously, it's height of winter, so it's not very bright outside. I've got my window, obviously, the blinds open to get some light in. But the problem is it's quite foggy today here where I am, and that's going to affect the lighting quality, no doubt. So we'll see how that goes. I mean, hopefully it shouldn't be too bad. It is about 12:15, so just after midday as I'm going to record. So the light naturally is at its height, so that should be okay. I mean, it looks fine. Just looking at it on the screen at the moment, but we'll see how that progresses as the episode goes along. So, all that being said, I hope you had a good Christmas then, everyone, and a nice sort of good New Year. I know, obviously, with Chapter 8, I probably said the same thing in there, but that was obviously me being preemptive, given the fact that I knew, based on the schedule, that Chapter 8 was going to go out in January, if I pre-recorded it and all that. But I've got no more pre-recorded RWBY episodes, so I need to get recording some more, including this one, and maybe if time permits, I might record Chapter 10 as well today. We'll see kind of how long this episode takes, and whether the lighting quality stays fine in the afternoon. Because the thing is, it being sort of about 12:15 as I'm going to record this, depending on how this long this chapter is, and how long my sort of preamble and then my post-episode discussion takes, then I may well sort of find myself in a position where I then go for lunch, and then somewhere around 2 o'clock, probably I'll have a look out the window and see what the light looks like outside, and if it's still bright enough, then I might try recording Chapter 10 as well today, but if not, then I'll just leave it at Chapter 9 and all. So a little bit of a plan there, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of what I might be doing today. I still want to obviously set aside a bit of time today as well to do recordings from my Strategist channel as well, but another thing I will say up front here, apologies if my voice sounds like it's a bit hoarse or I sound like I'm a bit under the weather. This last couple of days this weekend, I don't know, I feel like I may be coming down with a bit of a cold or something. It just feels like, my nose and my sinuses and, a bit of back of my throat are starting to get a bit sore and maybe a bit congested. I should probably have actually got myself one of my cold and flu sachets and made myself a hot drink with it and drunk that before actually doing this, but I'm sure I'll be fine. But so if my voice does sound a bit hoarse, that's the reason for it. Alright, I think that's enough by way of an intro preamble. Let's just get to the episode itself. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here we are about to go in. So yes, it's the fight between Pyrrha and Penny. My mind was a little bit rusty for a moment then, but here we go for the start of the emotional roller coaster, folks. 3, 2, 1, go. It's gonna be good. And by good, I mean it's gonna be tense as all hell. But again, I haven't actually checked recently on Google to see if there's any news on RWBY Volume 10. I know I mention this every so often, but I always keep mentioning it. But as far as I'm aware, there hasn't been any news. You know, we're still kind of in limbo, still kind of in the dark at the moment on whether anything's really happening, other than, you know, what we've heard a couple of years ago since Volume 9's release, which is that there is some kind of work going on in the background, but we don't know really the extent of it. So, who knows? Maybe it'll happen, but possibly not for a while, if it happens at all. I say that, you know, and people are going to be like, oh no, don't say that. We want it to happen. Well, of course we do. You know, I want it to happen as much as the next person. But the thing is, you know, I'm used to that sort of thing, that phenomenon of, you know, people saying there's going to be a sequel to something and then you wait years and years and nothing ever materialises. I'm a fan of the original Beyond Good and Evil from 2003, and there's been so much talk about that getting a sequel and that's never materialised. I'm used to that kind of disappointment. Right, volume up. Here we go. Right then, Osmiel Tater.
The randomization process for our next fight.
It looks like our first contender is Penny Polendina from Atlas.
Okay, I'm already going to pause for just a moment there. I just wanted you to look at here at Ozpin's mug of coffee. I think this is a little detail which, again, you know, I sort of remember obviously back in the day, volumes 1 to 3 of RWBY were using Poser, I believe. I think I've talked about this before. And obviously from volume 4 they then switched over to a new animation software, Maya. And I think, you know, I seem to remember back in the day there were certain sections of the RWBY fan community who were very, well, not... would they have been sort of against the change, or rather would it have just been like, oh, I always preferred Poser, you know, I preferred that style as opposed to the Maya style. But to be honest, you know, when you look at Poser and you look at the animation in these volumes, there are little details which if you pay, I think, close enough attention to, you can definitely see the limitations perhaps either of Poser or of the expertise of the animation team in this software. And I think if you look at Ozpin's mug here, when he's carrying it around and filling it up with coffee, you can actually see it. So he fills the cup up there. I don't know if you can really see it, but you look at his mug of coffee, you can see there's no liquid physics there, as to when he filled up the coffee, because he's got the mug sort of at an angle like that. I don't know if you can see on the camera, but you know, in real life, you tilt a mug like that, you can see the liquid changes, you know. But obviously that doesn't happen there, because I'm assuming that either Poser doesn't have the what would be the term, the capability to simulate liquid physics, or maybe it just didn't have that capability at all, so instead it's kind of like a solid object just appearing in the mug, and as a result it can't simulate kind of the proper shape of it too well, if that makes sense. So yeah, I guess, is that a limitation of the software, or was that a limitation of the team at the time? I'm not entirely sure. I would possibly suggest maybe it's a limitation of the software. I don't know. But then again, you know, that's just me sort of speculating a bit if I had to take a stab in the dark. But yeah, I think it's interesting. It's those kind of little details which maybe sort of show why they ultimately made the transition to Maya from Volume 4.
To begin the randomization process for our next fight.
Weird little thing to flag up, but just thought it's interesting.
Polendina from Atlas, and her opponent will be Pyrrha from Beacon.
Salutations, Pyrrha. It's an honor to finally meet you.
Yeah, about that, Penny.
This is going to be so much fun.
And this showdown here.
Mercury, what are you doing? You were hurt. Why? What's going on?
He ain't gonna tell you that.
Fine. If you're not going to tell me...
He's not gonna let you through.
Fighter, are you ready?
I do wonder why she doesn't just go to the door behind her, but maybe there's a reason. She's like trying to get to one of the authorities in the Colosseum, who possibly are, well, somewhere behind Mercury. Maybe that's it.
Showtime. Let's just keep this between us friends.
Also, actually, can I just stop for a moment there? Let's just rewatch that. Hold on. So, here. So you see this shot here, obviously, where Ruby's coming through that door there, and there's a big shutter door sort of behind there, but, hang on, wait. When it got to here... Oh no, okay, no. Oh no, actually, that is kind of weird, actually. Because you can still see that shutter door down there, the door where they came in, but now they're suddenly much further down the corridor. That's really interesting. That's a bit weird, that, actually, that. I see obviously what's happened there. They've moved the characters around for the shot, presumably when they were putting together this sequence. But now that I actually look at that, that's a bit jarring, that is, because the thing is that, you know, I mean, and obviously I know Ruby has the whole speed thing, and she may have just travelled a huge distance, but she wasn't very far from Mercury when this confrontation started, and he kicked her. I mean, Mercury didn't seem to really move backwards, did he? So surely this should be closer to the door? I don't know. Do you see what I mean? I don't know. Just a weird little thing that, again, I suppose, you know, when you're thinking about volumes 1 through to 3, you know, you can sometimes see elements of animation ropiness. I mean, this is one of those things that I think most people probably wouldn't notice. And to be honest, like, I think this is the first time I've noticed it. And I've rewatched this volume at least a couple of times, years and years ago. But, yeah, no, weird little thing. This is a weird comparison. Has anyone seen when Game Grumps did their playthrough of Sonic Boom, Rise of Lyric? That game, which, if you don't know, Sonic Boom, Rise of Lyric is, along with games like Sonic 06, classified as, I think, one of the worst Sonic games in the Sonic franchise. And I can't remember which episode it is in their playthrough, but there's a great section in one of their videos where their editor at the time, Barry, actually, they film him giving a frame-by-frame deconstruction of weird animation issues and choices in some of the cutscenes in the game. And it's like one of the early cutscenes in the game, there's this thing where when you go through it frame by frame, you see how the animators, the game devs, are sort of like moving the characters around in weird ways. And so you wouldn't necessarily consciously pick up on it when you're watching it in full speed, but when you go through it frame by frame, you definitely notice a bit of weird, well, a bit of animation weirdness where, you know, they start the shot with the characters in one position, but then suddenly in the next frame, after a quick transition, the suddenly characters like jumped ahead to another part of the location really quickly. And you might sort of unconsciously notice it, but not quite realise what it is you're picking up on. But yeah, this I don't know, it just reminds me of that weird little thing right there. It's interesting though, because I think I've said previously that, you know, going into this retrospective non-blind Let's Watch, with volumes 1 and 2 at the very least, I did remember more obvious and apparent aspects of animation ropiness in a minority of places. But I feel like this might be the first one this might be, well, obviously this is the first time I picked up on this, but this might be one of the very few instances that I've ever picked up on in volume 3, because I'm trying to remember, were there any others in volume 3? There may have been, but I've forgotten, but I don't know. Alright, let's keep going, so I'm not just constantly interrupting the flow of the episode.
Let's just keep this between us friends.
My word! What a tremendous display by Miss Paulandina!
Penny is pretty good, but so is Pyrrha. Oh, here we go. Here comes the mind bending. sometimes wonder, actually, with Ruby's semblance, did you notice there how she only flew down part of the corridor after she got beyond Mercury? I can never remember with Ruby's semblance. Can she just do that indefinitely? Or can she only do it in short bursts, kind of? Oh, here we go. The moment is here. Wonder if anyone in the Colosseum sort of picks up on that moment where Pyrrha's sort of staggering around, not really as though something's wrong. Yeah. Well, we knew this was coming. Oh boy.
No!
Ooh. This is your first... Oh, hello. It's, Pietro. So yeah, technically that was the first time we ever saw him. So he clearly had an idea of what his character would look like as early as,
Penny.
this volume. Well, your work's done, so you can bugger off, mate.
Broadcast, what are you doing? Kill the feed!
Something's wrong. We don't have control over the cameras. We can't even set up the broadcast.
What? How is that possible?
This is not a tragedy. This was not an accident.
Mistral.
This is what happens when you hand over
Just that
your
random
trust,
shot of another
your
kingdom.
safety, your
presumably.
children, to men who claim to be our guardians, but are, in reality, nothing more than men. Our academy's headmasters wield more power than most armies, and one was audacious enough to control both. They cling to this power in the name of peace, and yet, what do we have here? One nation's attempt at a synthetic army, mercilessly torn apart by another's star pupil. What need would Atlas have for a soldier disguised as an innocent little girl? I don't think the Grimm can tell the difference. And what, I ask you, is Osmond teaching his students? First a dismemberment, now this? Huntsmen and huntresses should carry themselves with honor and mercy. Yet I have witnessed neither. Perhaps Osmond felt as though defeating Atlas in the tournament would help
Such a
him
great
forget
moment,
his
though.
colossal failure
This
to
is.
protect Vale when the Grimm invaded its streets. Or perhaps this was his message to the tyrannical dictator that has occupied an unsuspecting kingdom with armed forces. Honestly, I haven't the slightest clue as to who is right and who is wrong. But I know that the existence of peace is fragile, and the leaders of our kingdoms conduct their business with iron gloves. As someone who hails from Mistral, I can assure you, the situation there is equally undesirable. Our kingdoms are at the brink
I'm going
of
to turn
war,
around, guys.
yet we, the citizens, are left in the dark.
Yep,
So I ask
that's the reason you want to turn around.
when the first shots are fired, who do you think you can trust?
It's a great speech
The feeds are all jammed. We can't get a message
because
out.
that's such an iconic
Will somebody
moment, I
tell me
think.
what in the world is happening?
Alert. Incoming Grimm attack. Threat level.
Wait,
9.
hold on a minute.
Please
Stop.
take shelter.
Sorry, I was just looking at the crowd. I know I'm interrupting this very serious moment, but hang on. Wait. Hold
What in
on.
the world is happening?
Wait. Hang on, let me just see that again. See this here? Look at this crowd shot here. You've got, obviously, you know, all your assembled civilians and students from the different kingdoms, and then you just have the random goon from Junior Xiong's bar just sat there with his popcorn bucket. I've never seen that guy before. Wow, they just decided to sneak that guy in there, did they? Well, you know, got to take a break out from committing crime in the kingdom, eh? To just chill out and relax and watch some nice Vital Festival fighting tournaments and all that. So, yeah, you know, even criminals need a break sometimes, apparently. But this guy, you know, he's not getting any breaks. He's about to find himself in the middle of a grim invasion. Oh, I've never noticed that guy before.
Alert. Incoming Grim attack. Threat level 9. Please seek shelter in a calm and orderly manner.
Ladies and gentlemen, please, there is no need for panic.
Time to panic.
Nevermore!
How did he get past the kingdom's defenses?
It wasn't alone.
What's your plan, buddy?
Hans, get to the city. But now!
The girl, I can explain.
You brought your army to my kingdom, James. Use it.
Well, that's not going to go too well, though. A certain criminal's about to make his appearance again.
Damn it! This is Blue 4. Blues 2 and 3, fall into defensive position.
Roger. Blue 3, in position.
Blue 2, what's your status? Blue 2, come in! Someone answer me, damn it!
So Neo either has some interesting tricks up her sleeve or is just genuinely that strong. She can take out all the enemy troops on board, well, all the human troops at least.
It's about time.
On one of these Atlas airships.
Where's it? Let's go!
Oh, it is good to be back.
Yeah, we do enjoy his presence. Well, until, of course, spoilers, he's no longer going to be with us.
Bring them to their knees.
Does make you wonder how they corralled all those Grim onto those cargo planes, though. Well, there you go. That was Chapter 9, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, so exactly what I remembered it being. So, indeed, there are a few things I can say, of course, you know, coming out of that, which we'll get to in a moment. Look at these concept arts, though, of the Atlas airship. Oh, never mind. There's Penny. Yeah. But no, this is the moment where the tonal shift is pretty much solidified. It's not a kids show anymore, ladies and gents. Oh, there we go, right. Jump cut. Right, so, ladies and gentlemen, concluding thoughts coming out of that one. Now, I know I've said a couple of times here that this is the point where the tonal shift is really solidified. Obviously, yes, you know, like I've said already, the last couple of chapters were setting that up very much with, of course, the reveal about the maidens, the flashback to, obviously, Amber's, well, the attempt on Amber's life, and then, of course, you know, Yang being tricked and disqualified out of the tournament, you know, but that's all just sort of kind of setting the groundwork, to put it that way. I think, you know, this was the point very much where people maybe started to realise that the tone in RWBY was well and truly now in much darker territory, because of course, you know, this is the first time we've seen one of our good characters actually die, so, you know, that really sort of changed the stakes of things. It really made people realise that, oh shit, you know, this is serious now. It's not just going to be, you know, a feel-good show of our good guys going out and saving the world and everyone's going to be fine and happy and, you know, the bad guys are going to all get their comeuppance. This is going to be a hard and difficult road for them to actually travel down. And I think, you know, that was really good and really striking back in the day. And it's one of the reasons why, you know, I think Volume 3 is definitely, for a lot of people, one of the more memorable volumes, in all honesty. At least, you know, based on conversations I've seen online, Volume 3 certainly seems to be one of the ones that people tend to rate as being one of their highest rated, or one of their most favourites, to put it that way. So you can definitely see why, in essence. But yeah, I mean, so obviously, you know, I could labour on and on about the tonal shift at this point, but, you know, I've already kind of done that to death, I think, already, both during my reaction to the episode itself and in other episodes of this series that I've done. So I'm not going to kind of harp on that point too much. But, you know, other things going on in there. Yeah, it's sort of, it was that animation point that I made earlier, quite early in the video. In fact, there's a couple really there, obviously, because there's the bit with Osborne's coffee that was, you know, I didn't expect to be talking about that for as long as I did, but I did. Yeah, I'd have to look into Poser and actually do some research on, you know, what are the limitations of that software, because I know you can do animation in it, as obviously, you know, Team RWBY did, but I imagine, you know, with various types of animation software, you have to, well, you probably, you know, if you're a studio that's looking to make an animation, and it's probably the same, you know, in like video gaming development circles and things like that as well, but, you know, you probably have to have an idea of what your story is that you're trying to make, and then, you know, from there you think about, okay, what sort of scenes and things is this story going to need in order for it to function, and then you have to try and, I assume, find an animation software that enables you to do as many of those things as possible. Because that's the thing, you know, you're obviously, you know, the story that you choose to tell is going to shape what kind of tools you ultimately try and pick, but just as equally, you know, your tools that you find are available to you, they too will shape what you're able to do. And so, of course, you know, it's kind of a two-way relationship, I guess, is what I'm getting at here. So, you know, you can certainly think of how when you plot out the story of something, how that might shape, therefore, the medium and the tools you need in order to create it, in terms of what's the tools you therefore desire to be able to use. But then, of course, when you look for them, you have to find what's actually available. You know, are there already tools out there that you can use, or actually, do you have to create your own? Can you create your own, or actually is it not really possible? Is it too difficult? And if so, do you therefore have to use what's available to you? And based on what's available to you, what limitations do they have? And therefore, what ramifications does that have for your story? Does it mean that certain parts might need rewriting? Or actually, does it mean that only tiny, minor little cosmetic details are only really going to be affected? And in this case, you know, I think Osborne's coffee mug is it's a cosmetic detail. You know, it's one of those tiny things that I think people probably won't notice, but still, it's probably one of those reasons why ultimately the Team RWBY chose to actually make the transition to a different animation software after this volume. Probably because, you know, they wanted to be able to do more stuff. They wanted to have their characters emote more, or they wanted to maybe put more effort and attention to detail into the visuals just to make it prettier, that kind of thing. So, you know, I would imagine there's maybe a bit of elements of both, actually. I know I said earlier that if I had to take a stab, I'd say probably they moved to Maya because of the limitations of Poser. But having said that, maybe there was a bit of two elements of things here. Maybe it was partly the limitations of Poser. Maybe it's also just perhaps that I don't know. Maybe the team felt like they just didn't have quite the necessary expertise to get the most out of Poser. Something like that. I don't know. It might be a mix of factors that drove the switch. And to be honest, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if it was. But yeah, there's that point. Then obviously there's that other point that I flagged up in the confrontation between RWBY and Mercury, that weird sort of moving of people around. Now, I guess on one hand, you could sort of say maybe the reason they're suddenly further down the corridor is because obviously RWBY did her speed semblance and shot forward a bit. But Mercury, would he have really moved from his original position? Because if you think about the starting position where they were standing, they were only a few metres away from the shutter door at the entrance to that passageway. But then, you know, RWBY does the speed thing, Mercury immediately intercepts, but then suddenly they're actually further down the corridor. So that almost implies that not only has RWBY moved, but also Mercury has moved backwards as well at a roughly equal or almost equal speed in order to intercept her. Do you get what I mean? Yeah, it feels a bit jarring in that sense, and I guess that's just one of those things which, again, you know, when you look back over volumes 1 and 2, obviously, you know, there's plenty of examples of animation ropiness there, where you can see that Team RWBY were kind of learning about animation. They were very much figuring things out on the fly, and you could definitely tell that this was a team of people who maybe perhaps in some quarters had perhaps not done much animation before, and so, you know, we're just sort of concentrating on getting things in place. And so, you know, you end up seeing things that maybe have not quite been caught. Maybe they haven't quite had the attention to detail to catch little things in the background. But certainly Volume 3, it definitely feels like overall there's been much less of those. We are getting to a point where the animation team are getting better and better, particularly at catching out little details. But I suppose that's just one example of something that maybe slipped through the net a bit. But yeah, I mean, it could be that actually, for all I know, during the creation process of this episode, it might be that there was a point where someone on the animation team did spot that after it had been recorded, maybe, but maybe it just got to a point where it was too late to fix it because the episode needed to go out and all that. You know, it needs to be shipped. We can't change it at this stage and all that, which, you know, happens sometimes when you're producing things. You know, you'll create something good, but then, you know, just days before the deadline of when it needs to go, when it needs to ship, you'll notice something about it. You think, oh god, there's like one tiny little detail on it that actually I wish I'd just changed. I hadn't noticed it before. But you think, okay, well, it's not a major issue. It's only cosmetic. I'm sure, you know, people will be fine with it. People might not even see it. So screw it. You know, we don't have time to change it. Just ship it as it is. And that happens, you know, it occasionally crops up. So it's not a biggie. I just thought it was an interesting little observation and all that. So yeah, there's that. So yeah, I wasn't anticipating that I would pick up on little aspects of the animation in this episode. But like I say, that one in the corridor between RWBY and Mercury, that's the first time I've ever noticed that. And like I said, I have watched Volume 3, not just when it, not just back in the day when I first encountered RWBY years and years ago, but I have rewatched it at least once or twice in bygone years since then. So yeah, first time I picked up on it. So yeah, it took me, what, 4 or 5 rewatches before I noticed that. So yeah, if it took me that much, then I'm going to assume that for the majority of people, either they haven't even noticed that until watching this video, or maybe, you know, like me, it took them at least a couple of rewatches to notice it. So yeah, I guess that goes just to show that it is a minor issue. It's something that, you know, you could very easily miss, as I have done. But yeah, you know, I wasn't also anticipating that I would make a comparison with Game Grumps Sonic 06. I'm not saying that this particular instance that we saw in this episode is equal to the kind of egregious crap that you saw in Sonic, not Sonic 06, in Sonic Boom, Rise of Lyric. If you watch Game Grumps' playthrough of Sonic Boom, Rise of Lyric, you will see that in that case, these moments where in cutscenes things are being moved around is actually not necessarily consciously noticeable, but you certainly pick up on something a bit unusual when you're watching it in full speed. So it is quite egregious in that sense. This example wasn't so egregious in that actually it was smoother and less noticeable in that regard. So not quite on the same level, but I raised the Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric example because I think it's a comparative point in essence. It's a point of comparison, which I think is just interesting. So yeah, any Game Grumps fans in the audience, give you a shout out and all that. Let me know if you're there. And God, you know, Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent now, but Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric, the Game Grumps playthrough of that's a series that every once in a while I always find myself rewatching because I find it such an entertaining series to rewatch. Aaron Hansen and Dan Avidan just playing and marvelling at how bad and broken that game actually is. But yeah, and I say that as someone who actually, you know, is not really into Sonic the Hedgehog. I've actually never played a Sonic the Hedgehog game before, I don't think. Well, that's a bit of a lie, actually. I mean, on my Strategist channel, I did do a one-off video once where I played about an hour of Sonic Generations. But other than that, I've never played a Sonic game. I never played Sonic when I was a kid, which, you know, shock and horror, you might be very surprised by, considering I was a child of the 1990s. when Sonic, of course, was at its heyday, and I never played it, so yeah. Surprising, I know. I was always a Rayman kid, I was. I never played Rayman 1, but I did play Rayman 2, Rayman 3, and Rayman M, and I always enjoyed those, so yeah. I was always, you know, a fan of Ubisoft games before Ubisoft kind of went to shit and all that, to put it that way. Yeah, sorry, that was a tangent and a half. That's got now to do with RWBY and all that. But no, so next episode, of course, chapter 10. I think, you know, if I remember correctly, what goes down in that episode. So obviously it's a lot of confrontation between the Grimm and, of course, you know, all the good characters as they fight to try and make sense of what's going on. I think, so I think chapter 10 ends with Blake encountering Adam, but chapter 11 is then where Blake actually fights Adam, and then of course Yang gets involved, and we know how that plays out. So there's that in essence. I think chapter 10 is chapter 10 also where Weiss unlocks her semblance properly, her summon, I think, possibly. It's either chapter 10 or 11, it's one of them. I can't remember which one. You don't need to spoil it in the comments and answer that. We will find out in due course, but I know it comes at some point. Yeah, it's been a while. Like I say, I have watched I have watched Rayman 3 a couple of times. Sorry, I've got Rayman on the brain now. No, I have watched Volume 3, like I said, a couple of times before, but it has been quite a few years since I last rewatched it, so my memory is getting a bit rusty in places. The thing is, like, you know, you forget the little details. It's the big things that stand out in Volume 3, particularly as we get into these final episodes, you know, where the brown stuff really hits the fan and our characters really go through the meat grinder. That's the stuff that you end up remembering most from this volume, so, yeah. Right, so, you know, that's just a quick look ahead, basically, to Chapter 10 and all that. But yeah, I mean, we're getting along in this non-blind retrospective Let's Watch. We're doing really, really well. We are getting through Volume 3, we're nearly there, and then, of course, you know, we have a few more World of Remnants, and then we have, obviously, Volume 4, and from there, other stuff that people have recommended I watch that's RWBY related, like, you know, RWBY animation team vlogs and things like that, which, you know, I'm definitely very interested in watching. So as usual, do keep your lists of suggestions for things that I could watch. Please do keep posting them every so often, because what I need to do, I keep saying this, what I need to do is I need to open a document in Microsoft Word and I need to copy paste everyone's suggestions into it, so I actually have all of them in one place that I can just refer to. And that way, you know, I can just sort of go down the list. But if you want me to watch anything in a particular order, ladies and gentlemen, please do let me know down in the comments and all that, because I get the feeling that, you know, all of this supplementary material that people are saying I should watch as well, you know, there might be a certain order that's good to watch that in. Obviously, there's things like the OSTs, which I think, you know, I don't know if necessarily people want me to watch that at any particular point, but what I'm thinking at the moment is that once we've concluded Volume 4 and I've gone through any sort of supplementary material on my Volume 4 DVD copy, I might then do the RWBY soundtracks for each volume, you know, and that won't just be Volumes 1 to 4, that'll be all of them, ladies and gentlemen, because I've never done that before. I know I'm pretty sure there are, you know, a lot of React channels out there who've done this, where after completing a Let's Watch of a volume of RWBY, they'll actually watch and listen to the OST, and I've never done that, and I probably should actually, because the thing about RWBY OSTs is, you know, the songs always have a bit of meaning to them, relating to the characters, to the plot, to things that are going on in the volume that they correspond to, and all that. So, you know, it'll be good to actually listen to those again, actually, you know, having once basically watched all of the volumes on the channel. So yeah, I mean, that's the plan at the moment. So, you know, after Volume 3, do any supplementary material that's on my Volume 3 DVD copy, get into Volume 4 and any outstanding World of Remnants. Once Volume 4's done, then do any supplementary material that's on the Volume 4 DVD, then do the OSTs, and then do anything else that people would recommend. So that's the working plan at this stage. I hope that sort of sounds like it makes sense to people and all that. So I was just scratching my leg down there. I know for a moment that made it look like I was scratching my freaking groin, but no, it's not what I was doing. No. Yeah, but let me know in the comments. Does that sound sort of like a reasonable plan? And if so, you know, keep leaving your suggestions for other stuff that I should be watching and reacting to, which might be quite interesting. So yeah, other than that, ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll wrap up here because it's getting towards lunchtime. It's nearly 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Looking at the lighting, you know, outside, it's still very cloudy. The fog has lifted a bit, but it's still really dark out, and you can tell from the visual quality on the cam feed at the moment. So I'm going to go eat some lunch, but if this lighting continues like this, then I may not do chapter 10. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, we'll see when it comes to 2 o'clock this afternoon. If the lighting is still reasonably okay, then I'll do the recording of chapter 10. But by that stage, you know, being in the UK at the height of winter, even early afternoon, the friggin', you know, the light outside starts to get dark really, really damn early, and of course that affects the webcam quality. So we'll see. I may record chapter 10 this afternoon. I may not. It depends how things look outside with the light and all that. Because the thing is, I know people would say, why don't you just turn on the light in your room, like close your blinds, turn on the light. I could, but I find that even with like artificial light, the webcam, then the quality goes a bit off and it doesn't look very good. Thing is, you've got to understand, I'm just an amateur who records these episodes with a cheap budget webcam. I'm not a pro at this by any means. You know, if you want to know what my PC setup looks like, I know there's some people out there who, you know, they have the most amazing setup. They have like 3 monitors on their desk. They have the, you know, state-of-the-art tower system for their PC and all this. I don't have any of that, right? I just have a single monitor. My tower unit for my computer is admittedly a powerful one. It is a powerful gaming PC, but it's, you know, what, about 8 years old now, 7 or 8 years old, so it's getting on in age and I do need to replace it at some point. So yeah, I don't have any fancy gear, and I know some people out there have those really fancy ring lights, whatever they are, that they sort of place behind their monitor so that the light kind of shines down. So it's not shining into the webcam or into the camera, but it's giving plenty of light and illumination so that you can actually see what's going on. I don't have one of those. Maybe I should invest in one. Who knows? I don't know. But yeah, so yeah, I think if the lighting starts to get darker and darker, then I'll put off chapter 10 until another day and all that. But of course, I will try and keep the, you know, upload schedule every Sunday and all as usual. So yeah, that's enough rambling from me. I think I've been going for what, nearly 19 minutes with this post reaction discussion and all that. Right, as already mentioned, Strategist is my main channel. You can find a link to that in the video description. I hope you of course enjoyed watching this, and I hope you'll join me for chapter 10. Other than that, thank you for joining me, and I'll sign off now. Goodbye everybody.